So let me start out by saying that if you are not using CSS Grid to build the majority of your layouts inside of Oxygen, then you are really missing out. I already did a tutorial that compares Grid to like the columns element in Oxygen or just using Flexbox controls inside of Oxygen. Grid is far superior and it offers far more upside, and it doesn't come with a lot of the negatives that the columns module and Flexbox come with. The problem is, or the challenge is, that a lot of people struggle to understand Grid in the very beginning. It's just like anything, really. It has a little bit of a learning curve, but once you understand it, you really unlock its power. And this is especially true when you use a framework, a utility class framework like OxyNinja. And I just want to say off the bat, yes, I am an affiliate for OxyNinja. However, I'm doing this tutorial and I use OxyNinja because literally I install it on every single website. Every website that I build comes with OxyNinja installed automatically. It's part of the blueprint that I use. So I would not be doing this tutorial and pumping up OxyNinja if I didn't use it on every single project. And you're going to see exactly why I use it on every single project. You don't have to know anything about CSS Grid. You don't have to write a single line of code. You don't have to use the grid builder inside of Oxygen at all. We're going to be able to build simple basic grids all the way to fairly complex grids just by using OxyNinja utility classes. I'm going to walk you through the entire thing in this tutorial. You're going to understand Grid better by the end of this tutorial, and then you're going to see the magic and the speed at which you can use and implement CSS Grid simply by adding a few utility classes. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at OxyNinja, the Grid utility classes, and all that it empowers you to do. Welcome back to another tutorial, everybody. This one is going to be a complete game changer for you. If you're not using a utility class system like OxyNinja, you're going to see exactly why you need to be using a system like this. Let's take a look at what we're going to be able to accomplish here. So I'm going to walk you through building simple even grid columns. So 2 column, 3 column, 4 column, 5 column, etc. We're going to talk about controlling the grid column size automatically. So there's some OxyNinja presets that allow you to create like 1/3, 2/3, that kind of thing, like offset grids. And then we're going to talk about the manual column size control that you're going to have over your grids, the manual row size control you're going to have over your grids. We're going to talk about grid cell position. We're going to talk about a really significant use case here, like practical use case that you'll probably run into all the time, which is alternating content, where on mobile, we actually want to change the stacking order so that we have, instead of content, image, image, content, we're going to have image, content, image, content. So that's nice and clean. It's going to be super easy. We're going to talk about grids inside of grids. And then I'm going to talk about gap control, mobile responsiveness. There's a lot of really cool stuff that we're going to cover. And this might seem like a lot, but look at the time on this tutorial. It's not a lot of time. We're going to fly through this, and that's going to prove to you the value of a system like this. And here's the promise I'm going to make. You're not going to touch a single line of code doing any of this, and you're never, not once, are you ever going to touch the grid builder inside of Oxygen. All right? Does that excite you? It should excite you. So let's get started. We're going to add a div into this first section here. And we'll just take a second to talk about general grid structure. So here is the wrapper. All right. So this is we'll call this grid wrapper. All grids need a wrapper that control the grid structure. And then you'll have the items inside of the grid. So in order to do this in OxyNinja, the naming convention is very, very simple. So for example, if I want 2 columns, I'll write the word columns and then I'll do -2. And it's going to find the utility class for me. And I'm just going to pop that onto the wrapper. I now have a 2-column grid structure. And I'll prove that to you by putting an image in here. And I'm going to set that image to a width of 100%. And you're going to notice that it does not span the entire wrapper because it is conforming itself to the grid structure. And if I duplicate that image, you're going to see exactly what's happening. We have 2 images side by side. Now I'm going to select the entire wrapper. And one of the things that Grid is really, really good at is gap control. So we're going to put a gap just by typing the word gap and then putting a dash and then choosing the size of the gap we want. So I'm going to choose a medium-sized gap. And you're going to see that I now have a gap between these 2 items. I don't have any extra room on top or on bottom or left or right. So it's a perfect grid. And the good thing about grid also is that as I continue duplicating these items, it's just going to keep following the exact same grid structure. And it's even going to put the gap automatically between the rows. So I have a perfectly symmetrical grid. Now I'm going to delete these items because very rarely do you just throw items into a grid. Typically, you'll throw containers into a grid, and those containers will contain other multiple items, like if you're making cards or something like that. So I'm going to hit add, and I'm going to hit add a div. And I'm just going to put a class on this div that's going to create like a pseudo card, like a placeholder. All right. So that's not really, relevant to the actual tutorial. It's just going to give us a visual placeholder for what like might be a card. And then I'm going to duplicate that div. And now we have two cards side by side. So there is a basic 2-column grid. Now, we haven't done mobile responsiveness yet. I don't want to throw too much stuff at you at once. So what we're going to do is build all these grids, and then we're going to come back at the end and talk about mobile responsiveness, because mobile responsiveness is very easy, but I just don't want to throw too much at you at once. So I'm going to select our wrapper here, and I'm going to duplicate it, because I want to show you what happens if I want to change this from a 2-column grid to a 3-column grid. So now I'm going to type in columns-3, and I'm going to select that utility class, and I'm going to duplicate my card, and you see that I now have 3 columns instead of 2. If I duplicate this wrapper and take away the columns 3 and add columns 4, you'll see that I end up with 4 columns, and I can duplicate my card, and all is well in the world. I'm going to choose the wrapper, and I'm going to duplicate that. And this is like, it's so fast and easy that I can actually just go through the monotony of adding all of these, even though it's so obvious, right? So I'm going to choose the wrapper, I'm going to duplicate, and I'm going to do the final one. This will be the last one. So we're going to do in this section anyway, not the last one altogether. All right, so I'm going to grab that card, and I am going to duplicate. So just like that, in seconds, I have a 2-column grid, a 3-column, a 4-column, a 5-column, and a 6-column grid. You see how quickly that happened. You see how easy that was. That is simple even grid columns with Oxy Ninja utility classes. And they all have their perfect gaps. All is well in the world. Let's move on. So let's talk about different like offset kinds of grids. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the wrapper, right? The grid wrapper controls our grid structure. And I'm going to type in columns-1-. And you're going to see that I have 2 options. I have a 1-2 and a 1-3. These are changing for me the fractional units of the columns. And I'm not going to get too technical with this stuff, but you can see that 1-2 is going to be a smaller first column and a larger second column. So that when I duplicate this card, it's automatically going to fill the rest of the space. And then if I put my gap on here, you'll see, we'll just continue using the medium-sized gap all the way down. You'll see now that I have offset columns. So these are obviously not even columns. I have a small column and a large column. Now I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to remove our 1-2, and I'm going to put on our other one. So this is columns 1-, and then my other option is 3. And so now you see I have a slightly different grid, a much smaller first column and a much larger second column. Now I'm going to duplicate this, and we're going to roll through our other options. So I have a columns 2-1, and then I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate that. And I'm going to take off the 2-1, and I'm going to put on the next one. And you can even just do shorthand like this a lot of times, like 2-, and it'll just find it because it matches. So there's 2-3. And then I will duplicate. We definitely don't want to make it a link wrapper. All right, I'm going to take off the 2-3, and I'm going to do 3-, and that's going to give me my 3-1. And then I'll duplicate that and take off the 3-1, and we'll do 3-, and I'll have my 3-2. So in seconds, what have I done? I've created a bunch of different offset columns. Now, the thing about the auto columns is they will continue following the same format. So this is the 1-2, I believe. So if I duplicate not the entire thing, but the card inside it, the next card will be small, the next card will be large. The next card will be small, the next card will be large. All right. So if you want that format to continue repeating all of the way down, then you can use these autos. If you don't want that to continue repeating, if you want to make a manual kind of complex grid where you control the span of each item or each cell inside of the grid, we can absolutely do that. That's what we're going to talk about next. So we're going to come down to grid column size control manual. So I'm going to choose the wrapper here, and I'm going to make this a 4-column grid. All right, columns -4. Choose that. And you're going to see here that I have my 4 columns. And you already know what we need to do next before we do anything else. We need to see what our gap is. Okay, set our gap. And now let's keep making 2 rows here. All right, so I'm just going to keep duplicating these cards. Let's say I wanted this card to actually span 2 columns, so it's a wide card. And then these final 2 cards also span the 2 columns. So I only need one of these cards to do this. I'm going to remove one of them. I'm just showing you how the grid works. And then down here, we'll only need one. So I'm going to not duplicate, excuse me. Oh, deleted the whole thing. Sorry, getting a little out of hand here. Hold on. All right. And click out and click in. Okay, let's delete that one. And let's click this one and delete this one. Okay, perfect. So now, remember, all I'm doing here is trying to control the span of one of these elements here. So I'm going to click this card, and I'm going to type in span, really call span, because there's a row span and a call span. So I'm going to do call span, and then you get to choose. Like, do I want it to span 2? Do I want it to span 3? Do I want it to span 4? I just wanted to span 2, because that's what we talked about doing. And then I'm going to come down to this end card right here. Remember, we wanted that one to span 2 as well. So I'm going to do call span 2, and voila, we are done. So now I have a much more complex grid simply by adding a few classes, like really one class to 2 different items or 2 different cells inside of my grid. I created a 4-column grid, put a gap on it, and then on the first item, I spanned it 2 columns, and the very last item, I spanned it 2 columns as well. Very, very simple. Let's go ahead, because that's so easy, let's go ahead and create another one that's like that. So let me go way up here and just steal one of my 4-column grids again. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come down here and we're going to click in here. Sorry, when I screen record, it's a little laggy and that's throwing me off here. But we're going to be okay. So what I'd like is one big center block. Actually, let's not do this yet because let's just do this in the next section. So we'll talk about row size control, because now we're going to combine column size control with row size control to create a different layout. So I'm going to choose the wrapper again, and we're going to set this to 4 columns. Man, I really wish I could type better. I'll practice. All right. So we're going to duplicate, duplicate, duplicate. And just as you saw before, we're missing a gap. So it's very easy to just throw on a gap property. Columns gap M, perfect. And then I want basically one large block here that spans 2 columns and 2 rows. 2 columns and 2 rows. So I'm just going to start out by selecting this second item, and we're going to say call span. The lag is killing me. Call span 2, perfect. And then I just do the same with row. So row span 2. So there's C row span 2. Now, you're going to see it doesn't do anything, and the reason is because it's not stretching to fill the available space. And the way that we do that is with one more utility class, and this is an Oxy Ninja utility class, simply called stretch. And we put that stretch on, and now that item is going to fill to take the available space. And if I duplicate that very last card, remember this is actually the last one in the position, it's going to fill on the opposite side. So now what I've done is I've created a much more, this is like, a classic layout really, but look how we created it in just seconds. And we have our gaps. It's all perfectly symmetrical. It's going to continue, if I put more content inside of this, it's going to continue stretching to fill the available space. It's not going to break. Really, really powerful stuff. And that was with a column span and a row span, manual control, simply with utility classes. No code, no grid builder, no nothing. You see how fast that happened. Next is cell position control. So we have this box called Move Me, and we're going to talk about how we can move this, not by dragging it around, but moving it with utility classes. And you might want to do this. There's a lot of reasons you might want to do this. I'm going to show you a practical reason here. But before we get down to the practical reason, let's just go ahead and test this out. So what I'm going to do is use the C row start and C column start classes to determine what column and what row this item needs to be in. Again, I am applying these to the individual item that I want to move. So the first thing I want to do is move it to the first row. So I'm going to type in row start, and then I'm going to choose row number 1. And you're going to see it jumps to the first row. Now that's not where I want it. I actually want it in this right corner over here. So now I'm going to move it to the third column. So if it's in the first row and if it's in the third column, it's going to be in the spot I want it to be in. So now I choose call start, and I'm going to type in 3 and choose call start 3. And you see it is moved exactly to the position that I want it to move on. Now what's important about this is me moving it on the desktop. What if I only wanted to move it at a mobile breakpoint? So Oxygen has these breakpoints by default, and in OxyNinja we map these to sizes. So this one right here is mapped to what is called the XL size, the extra large. This is the large, or L. This is the medium, or M, and this is the small, or S. So you see these classes: call start 1, row start 3, whatever. I said it backwards. But if I do row start L, you're going to see I have another whole set here. This is for the large device size. So if I want this to be in row 1 only on large devices and below, then I would put this class on here. You're not going to see it move now because we're not on the large device size. If I wanted to do column start L or M, right? I can change where it is on the medium devices. I can change where it is on small devices. This is how you control that. So you have full control over a cell position, an individual cell position at all breakpoints. I really want you to just understand how extremely powerful that is and how simple it is just by using these utility classes. Now let's take a look at a real practical example here. So let me make sure, okay, there's already a class on here, so I don't want to do that. All right, so let's take a look at our parent wrapper. We've got 2 columns, medium gap, we're set to stretch, and then columns L1. Let me take that off so I can walk you through it. So what we want to do is have these columns break to 1 column on large devices. And by doing that, here, let me show you how. So I'll type in L-1, and I'm just choosing columns L1. So on large devices, there will be 1 column. That's just how you read the class, right? It should be very straightforward. So I put that on. And when I go view the large device size, you will see that it's stacked. Except we have a problem. We have the content and then the image. And then the next one is image and then content. It would be really nice if we could put this image above this content, right? This is a classic problem that we need to solve in web design. So very simple. So I click on the element I want to move. We just showed you how to move elements, right? I only want to move it at the large, or I want to start moving it at the large breakpoint. Every other breakpoint below, it's going to be fine by default. So at the large breakpoint, I want to change its position. Now, here's where it's a little tricky because right now there's 1 row and 2 columns. So here's column 1, column 2. They're both in a row. I don't want to change its column position. I don't want to swap these. When it stacks on a large device, there will effectively only be 1 column and we'll be left with just row control. So I actually want to put the row start 1 class on here because on L devices, I'm going to do row start L because I'm working on large devices, and I'm going to choose 1 so that on large devices, when this stacks, the image moves to the first row. All right, so I'm going to click that. And if we go preview, you see that's exactly what we end up with. So we have an image, content, image, content. Now that took seconds. It took longer because I had to talk you through it. But if I was just building this, it would have been mere seconds and I would have had exactly what I wanted to have. That's the power that this infrastructure gives you, that this framework gives you. Let's move on to grids inside of grids. So we're going to take a look at another very common use case here. So I'm holding on to my, or I'm selecting my wrapper, and I'm going to make this columns, and we're going to do 2, 3. Yeah, let's do 2, 3. All right. Because we're going to pretend now that this is an image, and then we're going to put content over here. And I need this side to be a little bit bigger to fit another grid inside of it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a div, and that's going to be the container for our content over there. Now, 2 things. Number 1, you see there's no gap, so we're going to need to add a gap. And I'm just going to stick with the gap M for now. But you also see that this is not filling the entire space. It's not stretching all the way down, all right? So we already know how to fix that. We talked about that. We add our stretch class, and you're going to see right there that it snaps to fill the entire space. And so now what I can do is actually use another utility class from Oxy Ninja, and this one is for padding. So I'm just going to type in padding. Man, this lag is killing me, absolutely killing me. Padding XL. And that's going to put XL padding inside of this so that when I add like a heading, you see that we are nice and evenly spaced out there. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add just some text. This is what a classic, like maybe feature block section would look like. So big image over here, a feature headline, and then feature text. And then we're going to put a subgrid below it, or just a grid inside of a grid, really. So in order to do a grid inside of a grid, I just choose this container. I'm going to add a div, and I'm going to make it a 2-column grid. So I'm going to type in columns-2. And I'm just going to steal this, and we'll just pretend this is another card. And I'm going to pop that in, and I'm going to duplicate it. And then I'm just going to put a gap on this inner grid the same way that I do on all my other grids. And then we can just space these things out with a little owl spacing. This is not a Oxy Ninja utility class, but it's a utility class I've done a tutorial on before. So there you go. We have a grid inside of a grid in seconds. All right. So this is, a classic layout that you would use in web design. And I'm guessing that if you tried to build this with the grid builder or manually with Flexbox or whatever, it would take you a while, much longer than it just took me to do it. That's for sure. So you see the power of a system like this. All right. Now the question is, what about gap control? What about mobile responsiveness? All right, let's go back to the top. So we have our 2 columns, and let's just take a look at what happens like on devices. So this is the large device size. You see this one is off the map over here, so that's no good. If there was content inside of these cells, it would be mad squished. So obviously it needs some love. It needs some love. So the cool thing about this is I can actually preview at the device sizes and then add my classes if I don't already know them. Now, over time, you're going to learn this system so well that as you're building a grid on desktop mode, you can pop on the exact mobile utility classes that you need to make it perfectly mobile responsive without checking breakpoints. That's pretty much where I'm at. But if you're unsure, you can always just go to a breakpoint and see how the grid is behaving and then decide what you want to do and add a mobile utility class there. And the thing about classes, the reason you can do this is because a class is not applied at a breakpoint. A class is just applied to an element. So wherever it doesn't matter what preview you're in here, you add a class, it's just adding a class. It's not adding it at that breakpoint. So you can go to any breakpoint you want, see what needs to change, and add the appropriate classes. So for example, I'm good with this 2-column grid here at the large device size, but on medium, I'm not okay with that. On medium, I want it to be 1 column. So I would type in M1, and that's going to give me my utility class for columns M1, which stands for on mobile devices, make 1 column. All right. So there you go. We now have 1 column on mobile devices. If I go back up to the large device size, I still have 2 columns, and I still have 2 columns on desktop. So you can see how easy that is to change the grid based on the breakpoints. So this 3-column on large devices, I actually want that to break to 1 column because those are going to be too squished, and I don't really want 2 columns. So I'm just going to do on large, I want 2. On large, I want 1. So see columns L1, now I have 1 on large. Let's deal with this 4-column grid here. So on large devices, I would actually like 2 of these side by side. So I'm going to do that. So we'll do L-2. That's going to give me 2 at the large device size. And then on medium, I want it to break to 1. So see, I'm not going to go to the medium breakpoint. I'm just going to add M-1 here. You're not going to see it change because we're not previewing the medium breakpoint. But when we do check the medium breakpoint, you see that we have 1 column. All right, let's deal with this much larger one here. So this was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I go to the large here, that's definitely not good. In fact, we might have to deal with the XL here. So on XL, I want 3. So I'm going to type in XL3. And I'm going to pop that on, and now I have 3 at the XL. I want 2 at the large, so I'm going to do L2. And then I want 1 at the medium, so I'm going to do M1. And you see, this is how this system works. You just layer the classes on top of each other, and it all works out. So I come down to preview large. We have 2. I preview medium. We have 1. And then that's all good. We don't need anything else. Now, this last one, let's take a look at our XL. What we can do here. So let's do 3 at the XL. And then we're going to be able to do, let's check large. Okay. Let's do 2 at the large. So that's L-2. Let's keep 2 here and say at the S is when we want it to break to 1. So S1. So C columns S1. Now we have 1 at the S size. So now you see perfect mobile responsiveness through every single breakpoint, touching no code, touching no grid builders, just by using utility classes. Now, here's what's special, right? Yes, I can change the column, the column number on breakpoints. I can change these spans as well. So remember we spanned this 2 columns. What happens if I decide like, well, on a different device size, like maybe on, let's see, this device size, where are we here? So on this device size, I actually want this to just behave like all of the others. So let's check my structure panel. I've got the correct one done. So what I'm going to say is, so we're at, which breakpoint are we at? So this is large. So at L, I want to do span, that's call span L, and I want to choose 1. And you see that it conforms back to 1 FR now, 1 fractional unit, just like all of the others. And if I want to do that to this one, I can say, all right, same thing, call span L, because I'm working on the L breakpoint, and I choose 1 because I just want it to be 1 there. Or you can say, I want that one to be 3 at the large size, right? Now, I don't know if I'd ever do this kind of stuff, but I just want to show you that you have full control over these items at all breakpoints, whether it's the number of columns, whether it is the, how many columns they span, how many rows they span, all of that is adjustable at every single breakpoint. We already talked about moving items at certain breakpoints. Let's talk about gap control, right? Because we've only been using medium gaps so far, but if you ever come around and you're just like, you know what, I want a smaller gap for that one. So this grid gets a gap of S. Now it's a small gap. I don't like that. Maybe I want a huge gap, right? So I'll say gap XL. Now I can get a very big gap between the columns. And if I continue to build this grid out, you're going to see that the row gap responds in kind. So it makes everything perfectly symmetrical. Again, I cannot reiterate the power this gives you, the speed of development, the consistency of the look and feel of the websites that you create, that every single time you're using grids for layouts, the spacing is going to be consistent. And that's regardless of who's actually working on the site. If you have a team and they're all trained in using these utility classes, they can't mess it up, right? You're never going to have grids that just look off or that break or what have you. Like, this is going to be great for agencies, great for freelancers especially. But even if you're just working on your own website, having a powerful system like this where you don't have to mess with the Oxygen Grid Builder, and I will, let's put it out there. The Oxygen Grid Builder is fantastic. But my question is kind of like, why would you use something like that if you have cheat codes like this? Just get the cheat codes, install the cheat codes, and use the cheat codes. So you've seen we've very quickly made a bunch of different grids, some very advanced grids. They're all mobile responsive. We've taken care of traditional issues that happen across web design. I don't know what else I can do to kind of convince you that this is a extremely valuable system. Now let's talk about the clicking the link, buying Oxy Ninja. Yes, I am an affiliate for Oxy Ninja. I'm not making this tutorial for Oxy Ninja commissions. It's a nice bonus. I'm making this tutorial because I want to show you this stuff so that you can implement it in your game and make your life so much faster and so much easier. Time is money. Frustration is stress. You want to get as much time clear in your schedule as possible. You want to get as much stress off of your plate as possible. You don't want to have to mess around with this kind of stuff. You want to just be able to quickly build out complex layouts in Oxygen without any headaches, without any messing around, have it be super consistent, super consistent every single time, and then just move on with your life, right? So I would highly encourage you, if you're not using a system like this, click the link. And a lot of you, by the way, have asked, Kevin, how can we donate to you? How can we help support your channel? Don't donate money to me. Don't just give me money for the sake of giving me money. I love doing these tutorials. I love teaching. If you want to support the channel, if there's a tool like this and you decide, hey, this is really powerful, I should have this for myself, just buy it through my affiliate link. If you don't want to support the channel, don't buy it through the affiliate link. It's very, very simple. Again, I'm going to make these videos regardless. I want to create content for free that's better than the stuff other people charge money for. That's my main goal. Now, along the way, I'm going to recommend a tool here and there. And if you decide you want the tool, buy it through my affiliate link. And we all win. You win because you get a great tool. I win because I get a commission. We all win because I keep producing great content. That's just how this is going to work. All right. So that's it for this tutorial. If you have any questions, drop a comment below. I respond to every single comment. Hit like, hit subscribe. Make sure you hit the notification bell after you subscribe. I love you guys. I'm so thankful for all of the support. We just passed 2,000 subscribers, which, that's in less than a month. I went from 500, 600 subscribers to over 2,000. Channel's growing fast. It's really, really fun. I love interacting with all of you guys. I'll be back very soon with another tutorial. Until next time, peace.